Hey you, it's Jess here and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to try my first hand at reading journal and journaling in my reading media journal. And this is a journal from Notebook Therapy. I'm going to have a haul up this month soon with all of these things. A lot of these things that you're seeing here will be in that haul. But I thought I wanted to get September started, get the ball rolling on this reading journal. So I got this order in from Maragona Suli of these beautiful Dark Academia stickers, and I thought I could use this as a theme for September. I thought I just wanted to do I wanted to try out this sort of, doing like a little page for September and then a little calendar and a TBR, and then we'll go into the next lot of pages, which will be setting up for some future book reviews or not really going to be reviews, they're going to be book thoughts. At the time of filming this, I had finished my first September book. Like, I finished it 4th of September, and I think I filmed this the 5th. So I will make space for that in the review section, but I don't put in the review because first I'm waiting for some star rating stickers from Scribble Prints Co. and I also am still collecting my thoughts on the book, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'll talk about my TBR and also a little bit about that book coming up. But yeah, so I still have a lot of back planning to do in this planner, but again, I'm waiting for more stickers and things to come through before I get to play with more different spreads. So there will be a standard setup. We'll do the 2024 back planning pages together, I think. But in this one, I was like, you know what, let's try and do a monthly thing. So we're going to set up September. And I am going to also do a spread at the end for the Rings of Power Season 2 TV show. Because I wanted to do sort of journaling my thoughts about each episode as they come out. And when I first filmed the start of the spread, the first 3 episodes had just come out, so I wanted to write about them. And then at the end, I have these sort of overview shots, which will include actually my little review of the 4th episode. So filming this has taken a few days and a week or so, but yeah, it's been fun to try this out for the first time. I won't say this will be my style all the time. I just wanted to try it out and try some things that I saw in other people's journals that I've been watching. And yeah, we're just trying this out for September. I don't know if I'll do a monthly one all the time or I don't know. Because with the journal page set up, so you're going to see after this, I just have 4 books to 2 pages. So it's not going to be a whole page for one book. But that could change in the, there's back planning where I will be doing a book for a whole page because I wanted to decorate more and do more of the book for that. So it'll be a different lot of things. I was considering in the future that when I have all the supplies and I'm rolling, doing my thing in this journal, that I would maybe film over the whole course of a month and you would see my September setup, but it would be in October and then you'd get to see me using it over the whole month. That's an idea I've thought about in the future. But for now, you're probably just going to see scattered bits and pieces as I catch up on back planning. And then we're probably going to be setting up 2025 pretty quickly too. So yeah, if you're new here, this is my first proper reading journal video. I usually do sticker planning, memory planning, other types of planning, and not really journaling. So, and the other thing is, with writing reviews, I struggle with what to write, which is kind of funny because I have an English and history degrees, but I still struggle to write my thoughts down of a book. I finished those degrees a while ago, and I kind of just, my brain is leave me alone. I'm done with that. But I still really, really love reading, and I talk a lot out loud about books for a long time. for a long time. I can remember books really well later on if I'm talking about them. But when I sit down to write about them, it's harder. So I kind of want to practice more of doing that as a different way of thinking. So that's kind of my reasoning for also getting into the journal. Plus, it's been really fun to like draw things and use markers and use stickers. I printed off this page of like old text onto sticker paper just so I could tear it up and make a background. Color-wise, it doesn't quite match, but I think it overall adds to the feeling of it. I was also trying out these new Tombows, but I thought the dark brown didn't really go with the colors of the rest of the stickers. So I'm just going to stick with this one Tombow, which is the Cappuccino color. I can't remember the number, so I apologize. But here I'm just putting in a calendar for the month of September, and then I thought I saw this cool design where you use the Tombow or a different color marker to make what looks like a piece of letter paper or student paper, letter paper, notebook paper. And I thought that'd be really fun to like list my TBR there. And then I just decided to add a colorful grid to the calendar because I thought that also went with the sort of dark academia feel, sort of graph paper, letter paper, the academic feels of it. Now, what I'm going to do with this calendar, I don't know. I've just put it in because I didn't have a huge TBR to put in. I'm fairly conservative with my monthly TBRs because I don't know if I'm going to do like a big reading month or a very small reading month. So I just sort of get my next books that I'll totally be reading in there. So I don't know what I know there's people who track like they do lines that track the days of the month that they're reading certain books, and they do a key with the book. And I've considered that, but I didn't really want to mess with like the grid color, especially because I have no other Tombows that would go with this. But yeah, so that's what I've got for now. I'm just going to have a cute calendar, I guess. And then I was putting in my TBR. So the first two books was currently reading at the end of August, so I knew I would finish them in September. So we have The Gate of Gods by Martha Wells, which is book 3 of the Fall of Illyrian trilogy. And then we have Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is my current audiobook. And I'm reading Gate of Gods as a Kindle book. And at the time of filming this, I had just finished it like the day before. So, yeah, as I said. But yeah, and then Rhythm of War is book 4 of the Stormlight Archive, which I've been rereading to be prepared for the 5th book coming out in December. I've originally read them in 2022, so I wanted to reread them. And it's almost done. I have a few hours left of the audiobook. And then my next audiobook is going to be The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, which is the new series from the Expanse writers, which I'm really excited about. That actually came out in August, so I'm ready to read that. And actually the 1st of October, they're bringing out the first novella related to the new series. So it'll be good to get it done before the novella comes out too. And then my next Kindle book is The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. I saw this recommended on, I think her name is Elliot. She reviews a lot of fantasy books. Her name is Elliot. I can't remember the full YouTube name. But she recommended to reading The Ninth Reign if you like Stormlight Archive, because it's a fantasy, but like the Stormlight Archive, it's in a completely different kind of fantasy world. Like, it's not what your typical Lord of the Rings medieval kind of world, dragons or anything. This is a completely kind of different fantasy world. And I have since started that, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I really enjoy her writing, and the world is really cool. Maybe in another video we can talk about that if I do the spread. I don't know. But for a second, I could probably talk about The Gate of Gods. I can't say too much because it is the 3rd book in the trilogy and it finishes things off, and everything would be a spoiler. But I would say it's a full Illyrian series because there are 2 prequel books called The Element of Fire and The Death of the Necromancer. And you don't have to read the prequel books for the trilogy, but I would say, in my opinion, you 100% should, because it's not just world building, but also like both of the prequel books are like referenced in the trilogy books, and they also it actually adds to the different twists and reveals, not just being like, oh, that character was in the first book and now they've named a building after them kind of thing, which is one of the things. But there are also like important, I think, background information for how everything works in the trilogy is in the prequels, especially for the Death of the Necromancer, because that prequel takes place only a couple of decades before the trilogy begins, and it's basically, yeah, I don't want to even spoil those characters, but yeah, the main series, it's in a fantasy world called Illyrian. Well, the country is called Illyrian, and in the first book, the first prequel book, it's actually set in a sort of Elizabethan Jacobean era with rapiers, and it's really cool. And then the second book, The Death of the Necromancer, is set in the sort of Victorian period, so it's a couple hundred years after the first prequel, and they're just beginning to have like the very first automobiles and the first electricity, but they're dressing as Victorian people. And then the trilogy itself is set a few decades later, and it's kind of the sort of World War I feels to it, because when you come back to Illyrian, it is now under siege, under attack by a mysterious group called the Guardier, and they have airships, like the big blimp kind of ships, very steampunk, but they are able to like just appear. They don't actually, in Illyrian, they don't know where they come from, this Guardier, and so the attacks are like pretty intense. On top of that, so the main magic and fantasy, I would say, of Illyrian is wizards and sorcery, and one of the prequels kind of tells you, there's also necromancy, but yeah, the main magic really is wizards and witches or sorceresses. And there's also a fae world, so fairies as in traditional folklore kind of fairies. And they're much more prominent in the first 2 books, and then in the trilogy there's not really any more fae anymore, because they've built train tracks across the country and the iron stops them from, because they don't like iron. So that kind of stops them from being around, but it's sort of their history, that they've had fae. But they still have wizards, and they still have, wizards are a huge part of their society. And you're basically born with magic, but if you don't use it from childhood, you can actually lose the abilities. So that's interesting. But the thing with the Guardier is that they have special wards on their, protective spells on their airships that the Illyrian wizards are not able to counter. And they actually have spells that can make your weapons explode, like machinery, just come apart, so they can't even use guns against them. So they're a pretty brutal enemy. And the trilogy is about the character Tremaine, and she is a young, she kind of, I can't really recall what her age is. She might even be in her 30s, because she calls other characters younger than her, but she is an adult woman, Tremaine, and she doesn't have magic, but she's at this point, when you begin, she is volunteering for the AIDS Society. So when there is a bombing, she goes out there and she helps recover people and look after things. But then she is called to a separate project called by the Villa Institute, which are using so in the Death of the Necromancer, you find out that there are these things being invented called the Wizard Spheres. And basically they're spheres they want to try and let people without magic be able to use magic by using these spheres that were made by wizards. Anyway, by the time of the trilogy, they are trying to use these spheres against the Guardian, and there are like world gate spells that they have found, that they travel to perhaps the homeland of the Guardian. Anyway, because they don't know where they come from, because they just appear through magical gates. And Tremaine is related to these sort of wizard spheres. Her adoptive uncle basically has made a very powerful sphere, and they need it for the project. So she ends up having to go and help them out, and then gets stuck into the whole adventure. But we're getting started on Rings of Power here, so I apologize for talking so much. But yeah, so it's sort of a World War I kind of world where you have automobiles and you have electric lights and torches and things. But yeah, and the whole thing unravels. Like, I don't want to spoil any of the rest of it, because I went into these books without really knowing anything about them. But the main thing is that it's like wizards and fae in the beginning, but it becomes more about wizards and then the Guardian and like what is their magic. And then you also meet a third group of people called the Cyprians or Serprians, who are more, they don't trust wizards. They kill wizards. So one of the other main characters is actually a wizard hunter. That's his like job in life, is killing wizards. Because in the place where Cyprians live, wizards are pretty mad and bad. And it's also connected to the Guardian. So, although they're kind of different, lots of people. So there's 3 kinds of people with different magics, and it's fun. And that was the third book that I read, the final, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 in the end, because I thought the ending was really good. I tore through that book. I read it in like 5 days because I just had to keep going. I couldn't stop. And my main gripe with the series was that I didn't really like the main character, Tremaine, that much. In the first book, she's fine. Like her. Then like 30% through the second book, she just becomes... I found her extremely immature at times, and I just didn't understand why she was acting this way to everybody. Like, people would be asking legitimate questions, and she'd be rolling her eyes at them, and then being like, oh, I have to kill this person or something. They're so annoying. And I'm like, what the heck? And she does that through the rest of the books, which is kind of annoying. I just had to roll my eyes at her, rolling her eyes at everybody. And it's like she's rolling her eyes at like the colonel who's just trying to ask how this or that military operation's gonna work. And I'm like, just communicate, okay? Anyway, that was my main issue. And I felt like Tremaine and the other like protagonists, Ilias and Gilead, in the second and third books became a really part of their own little clique against everybody else. And they felt kind of high school, even though it is adult fantasy and they're adults. They felt kind of immature to me, and it's just, I mean, I'm not going to like and agree with every character I read, but it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of annoyed me, because she would just be like competitive and roll her eyes at people, and they'd be asking questions, and then she just wouldn't communicate with them, and it just kind of annoyed me. I don't like that kind of thing, miscommunication, but it wasn't really miscommunication, it was just... she thought she was above or below them. It was a very odd thing, and I wasn't quite sure what her characterization was supposed to be. And then there is a character from one of the prequel books that is a protagonist, and they're also in the... she talks about them, and she knew them, and so she talks about them. And the way she talked about them, I guess it's a funny thing. I wouldn't say it's a criticism, but I would say it's really funny that because we were in the head of that person in a previous book, I felt like I knew them in a specific way, and then Tremaine knew them in a completely different way than I did, so I just couldn't get on board with what she would say about them, because I'm like, well, I don't think they're that way because I was in their head not that long ago. I don't know if you've had that too, like, I don't know, how other characters perceive characters that you also know. It's kind of odd. It's an interesting experience. But anyway, I just started talking about that. But I will say, if you're interested in like, I suppose the first two prequels are really male-led, although they have good female characters. But then the trilogy itself is female-led with Tremaine. If you're looking for a different kind of fantasy with a lot of seafaring, actually, there's a lot of boat time. I would highly recommend. I really enjoyed this Fall of Illyrian trilogy and the prequels. Definitely read them first, though, because it adds so much more to the story. Like, there's a huge twist reveal in the second prequel that you have to have read the first prequel to understand. Like, otherwise you'd be like, okay. But yeah, I really enjoyed them, and I'm looking forward to reading more, because I've been reading Martha Wells' like sci-fi, her Murderbot Diary series, but I also read her newer fantasy book called Witch King, which is a different world, but she's writing a second one for that, and I'm really excited. I do really like her writing style. But yeah, I would definitely try out Illyrian, because it is completed and you get 5 books and they're pretty quick and easy to read, and there's a lot of, I feel like they're really fun and different, especially if you like the whole wizard thing. But yeah, so that was the first book I finished in September, and I've just started the 9th Reign, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm about 20% through, and yeah, it is a completely different kind of world. You've got, I'll just quickly mention that they've got Eberons, who are, they're kind of elves kind of thing, but they're not. They're just taller, more beautiful, immortal people, but they're not immortal. They got their power by drinking the sap of their tree god called Yggdrasil. But when we get into the book, the tree god has died, and so they've actually started drinking humans' blood to be able to live longer. But that backfires on them, and I won't go into that because, you know, that's all you really need for that. It backfires, and so one of our main characters is one of those Eberron, like, weird people. And then you have a human woman called Vintage, and she like runs a winery, a vineyard. But these like vineyards are like super huge forests, and like they're gigantic, and they're actually and you find out that they're having to keep back the wilds of the forest, because they're all like, the forest can get infected with the wild, they call it. And basically centuries before, they had huge fights with these creatures that they just call, I think, Jurielia or Urielia, and they call them like the worms. And then apparently they left a whole bunch of what they call the behemoths behind, and they break down into the behemoths break down into the ground and poison the soil and create these magical, poisoned, dangerous woods and forests that are filled with like parasitic spirits and things, and super huge wolves and stuff. I don't even know. And then a piece of a behemoth is actually stuck in the sky, like in the atmosphere, and they call it the corpse moon. Anyway, so she's another character of ours, and she wants to research like what is up with these behemoths and stuff, and like why is it making the wilds the way it is. And then we have a third character called Noon, who is actually they call her Fel Noon because she's actually like a witch who creates this, and they have the ability with their bare hands to suck the life out of people and turn that life into this thing called winnow fire. And it's like a magical fire which can create a drug called Icarus. And if you have the drug, you have dreamless sleeps, but they can also forge weapons out of the fire. And anyway, they keep these witches imprisoned because they find them so dangerous, and then they imprison them, and then they use them to create this winnow fire and like harvest their powers, but they're kept in a horrible prison by these priests and nuns, basically. I don't know, it's crazy. So you have these 3 characters and it's a really cool fantasy world so far. as I said, I'm just 20% in, but that's kind of like the gist of where this fantasy begins. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say about that, but I am enjoying it. And yeah, I thought that was a really cool basis for our characters and this world that they live in. And it is like a fantasy medievalish kind of world. Oh, and the Winify people, like the witches and the priests and sisters, they ride giant bats, which is cool. Anyway, as I said before, I didn't even talk about like my review page, but I just separated the page into 4 sections, and I just did the letter paper marker all over it to make it look like pieces of paper stuck in, and then I layered in some of the decorative paper that I printed off because I like the way that looks underneath the black lines. And then I put in a section to do my Gate of Gods review when I've got my thoughts together. I will say don't read the words if you don't want to be spoiled by things, because I will be writing spoilers in this Rings of Power section. But here I just wanted to do a double spread on my Rings of Power viewing of the season 2. And I just put a little section for each episode, although I'm going to pair 7 and 8 together because technically what I've heard is that episodes 6, 7, and 8 all take part in the one battle that's going to happen. It's part of the story, so it's not really a spoiler, but there's like a huge siege that happens, and it's going to be like 3 episodes long. So I thought I'd just put 7 and 8 together because I think a lot of the thoughts will be, okay to put together. I just printed off a bunch of stuff, promotional material from the Rings of Power, like the Anatar with his crown and Elrond in the forest. And we have Arondir and Disa and Galadriel, and then I just did the poster for the show. And I laid it with these really pretty floral stickers, which I can't remember where I got them from. Sorry. And then there's the ring sticker that I actually drew, but it was printed and cut by Scribble Prints Co. This is a very simple little spread, I think, and I like the addition of what am I saying? I don't know. I like it. The little pictures of everything. But that is everything that I'm going to show for this reading journal. We set up my September front page, although in the future I would like to make it a bit more useful, but we will see. Let me know what you think down below. And then I did a fun little mini review page where you don't have to do a whole lot of decorating for every single book and have a whole page of thoughts, just like you can put 4 books here. And then I did a double spread for watching Rings of Power because I wanted to put some TV, movies, music, and video games into this journal too. And I thought Rings of Power was perfect because it's also related to books. But I hope you enjoyed this reading journal. Please like and subscribe and let me know in the comments. And I love you. Bye bye.